Hello and welcome to Full Disclosure, a podcast project which, as you will know if you've listened to a single episode, was conceived entirely to let me spend more time with fascinating people than I would ever get to do on the radio. I can't believe it's been going since 2019, or that we have interviewed over 150 different people from show business, politics, musicians and authors. And there's not a single, well actually there is one that I don't think went very well, but I'm never going to tell you which one it was. And I hate it when I reveal that, because you start sending me your suggestions for which one you think it was that didn't go very well. And I'm like, well, that one went brilliantly. What are you talking about? But there was one that I thought could have gone slightly better. The one I'm sharing with you this week categorically didn't, because we've been having a look back at some of the older episodes, some of my favourite guests. So this week we've reached into the vault and plucked out one that really stands out for me, not least because Steve Coogan is such a private individual. For someone who is so incredibly well known and has been written about so much, often from quite an unpleasant perspective by the tabloid media, he doesn't do interviews. I waited 25 years to get this one. So when it happened in 2019, I was both incredibly nervous and incredibly excited. And as with one exception, as Full Disclosure always does, the encounter lived up to my expectations. He talks a lot about his early life, growing up in Manchester, the creation of Alan Partridge, or all the other things that he'd done, of course, including conquering Hollywood. And at the time of recording this little introduction, he is, of course, portraying Jimmy Savile in an incredibly complex and nuanced piece of drama called The Reckoning. So we thought it would be quite a good time to, for people who haven't seen it before, it's going to be absolutely incredible. And for people who have, myself included, it's still truly riveting. Thank you. We'll begin at the beginning, life-wise, rather than career-wise. But you never actually wanted to be famous. You didn't. It was you wanted to be an actor, you wanted to be a performer, but the actual trappings of celebrity were never something that you either sought nor particularly, I think, enjoyed.
Only insofar as it enabled me to do stuff that I like to do, which is I like to communicate with. I mean, insofar as I want to communicate with as many people as possible, creatively.
Sure.
And so in that respect, then I need to reach an audience. Otherwise, I'll be talking to myself. But all the stuff that goes with it, no. I mean, I've no real time for it, and it doesn't really interest me.
No interest in it. And let's begin then at the beginning, because you grew up in Manchester in a big Catholic Irish family, which I think resonates later in your work. But I mean, did you have your own bedroom? What sort of setup was it?
No, it was sort of, I would say, lower. I mean, it's very hard to sort of pigeonhole these things, but the things that I would observe about it are that it was very a big family, aspirant. I would say my parents were, but not insofar as in terms of materialistically aspirant in terms of wanting to be. Just improve ourselves.
Both parents were Irish. Mum and dad.
No, my mother. Well, actually, my mother went back to Ireland. My mother was evacuated to Ireland during the war. Her parents came over from Ireland. She was born in England. They sent her back while they came over, because a lot of Irish people in the diaspora, they came to England to work. There's no work in Ireland.
Yes.
So very working class. I would say what would be termed pejoratively in Ireland as bog Irish, which meant that they grew up in poverty. My mum, went to school in her bare feet in the 1940s. Yeah, or in clogs on a good day.
And that's what puts the word aspirant in context, isn't it?
Because it was aspirant.
They wanted you to be comfortable. They didn't.
Well, yes, they wanted to, but it wants to be that thing of better ourselves. So,
yes.
So I mean, there was. I mean, I always tell people that when other people bought colour TVs, which were the sort of the item to have in the sort of early 70s, we bought Encyclopedia Britannica. That was the sort of about the same
one
price.
volume per month. Was it?
No, but the whole lot in one. Which was like £500 in 1977, which was about the price of a colour TV, maybe a bit more than a colour TV, but that was more important that we had that than a colour TV. So it's kind of wanting to be improve ourselves, improve our minds, and make ourselves more useful.
Did it work?
Well, no, I just watched. I don't think I don't. No, I just watch TV. I mean, but
500 quid down the pan, then.
Yeah. But I mean, just sometimes maybe at home we'd look at it occasionally. But it looks. I mean, I think it's still there. You know, it's still on the bookshelf, my parents' house, and it looks pretty clean and unused.
So the spines are unbroken on the back of it.
Yeah.
Did you? I did slightly cliche question, but I think the family setup deserves it. Were you competing for attention then from quite a young age? Because two of your brothers. There's 6 of you, right?
6. So 6 of us that are, if you like, the biological products.
And then there were foster children coming in and out.
We've got like adopted sisters. I have 2 adopted sisters now, from that originated as foster children, and there are people that we fostered. My parents fostered people short term, people who were abused, people who were wards of court, and. So there would always be short-term people who...
Was that linked to the religion? Was that part of your mum's Catholicism?
Yeah, I mean, yes, but they were very... Their thing was, you know, people... It was always very sort of, I'd say, left of centre kind of sensibility, which is, you know, people who've got... who are lucky and privileged should help people who... The haves should help the have-nots. Yeah. That was just the general... way that we were educated, and in the home, you know, and it was, I would say, religious, but it was all insofar as the values, and what we impart to other people and how you behave, and it was quite strict in some respects, but it was always about, unlike when we fostered children, you know, my parents would cut them more slack than us,
right?
That they would say, well, they allow them to transgress.
Did that bother you?
At the time, well, a little bit. I get annoyed. You're not supposed to do that, but I kind of understood. You know, how come he can do that and I can't? But really, only if the guy was about the same age as me, which happened a couple of times. But generally speaking, if they were little kids, then of course, no, you understand that they've some of them got problems, and many of them had problems.
So that changes the nature of the question about whether you competed for attention, doesn't it? Because I sort of thought 6 siblings. Your 2 brothers, Martin and Brendan, both kind of have the performative gene, don't they? They kind of,
but I've got 4 brothers, so I got 2 older brothers, and 2 young brothers, and my sister Claire is the eldest of the 6 of us, as we were back in the day. And but I wasn't supposed to have competed with anyone in particular. It was just that to get any kind of attention, you had to make a noise, and I would say, you know, look at me, you know, look at me, please. You know, so I mean, just to, but then we were, you know, we'd just go off and do our own thing. We're all very different.
Sure.
I'd go and hide in the front room and listen to music and listen to comedy records. And
what was on the comedy records? Maybe.
Well, I think my dad showed me, like, it was all in those days. Like my education in comedy predated VHS, so I kind of just missed the Monty Python TV shows.
Right.
But and before the arrival of VHS machines, which is I mean, I kind of grew up during what I'd call the golden age of television, where you couldn't record anything, you had to watch it, and there was limited choice. So
3 channels.
3 channels, so everybody watched the same thing. So cultural reference points now between for certain people of a certain age are quite narrow. And that's.
So what would you laugh at? What were the first things you...
So I'd listen
with
to,
your dad, what would you laugh at
with your dad? Well, not with him. He'd say, look, here's some funny records. These guys are funny. Bob Newhart and Shelley Berman, and we had some records of those guys. And then the Monty Python records. But that was my brothers, really. My older brothers were good taste arbiters.
Right.
Quite esoteric, deliberately, almost like, ostentatiously esoteric.
And you get to be, as a result,
in terms of music as well.
Yeah,
like,
of course,
I remember it was deliberately esoteric in a way that I sort of owe them a lot for. I certainly owe Martin, my brother, a lot, because he'd said, you know, this music that most people like is shit, and this music that not many people like is really good, and you need. And so he laid some ground rules, and I kind of gravitated towards that. I think in a way that was almost like looks kind of quaint now. I remember refusing to go and see Grease. The film Grease when I was 12 because it was too commercial.
Too mainstream. So it made you precocious in a way, although probably without realising, because you'd have meant it when you were 12. You really didn't want to go and see Grease.
I mean, the part of me did, but I was like, I just wanted to. But I did gravitate towards things that I thought were interesting and a bit avant-garde. And Monty Python was certainly it was funny on one level and stupid on one level, but kind of avant-garde on another, and
shocking as well at times.
Yeah, and that was all tied in with music, because it was stuff that was, I found interesting, was stuff that was not just reinforcing well-worn tropes and cliches. So, androgynous male rock people were more interesting to me than just boring, vanilla-flavoured.
I don't know what difference having Big Brothers had, but that's the kind of thing you could have got your head kicked in Middleton at that time of...
Well, it was all tribal, and music was all tribal. I mean, look, we grew up in the nice suburban part of town, and there was a council, Overspill Estate, on the other side of town where my grandparents lived.
Okay.
So we would go back and forth, but certainly ours was a little bit of kind of Pleasant Valley Sunday.
Yes.
Very nice area, ready to grow up. As a kid, ride your bikes out, and very safe. You'd see people washing the cars on the driveway on a Sunday and they'd mow the lawns, and it was kind of nice suburbia.
Comfortable.
Yeah. And then, I went to a grammar school, so there were smart kids from the council estate. It was one of the good things about the grammar school education, and there's some bad things about it too, I think, in terms of division at that age, or judging kids when they're 11, which I think is wrong, but nevertheless.
Did you waltz in? Did you find it? Did you?
Yeah, I mean, my parents were my parents loved Shirley Williams and loved the idea of comprehensive education, didn't like the idea of people being judged, but of course they wanted all us to pass the 11 plus, because that was our best shot at a good education. And Catholic grammar schools were kind of like sort of as close as you could get to public school, but free.
Of course, yeah.
And they kind of tended to, and I went to a good school. It was a De La Salle Brothers school. But it was, some of the kids from the council estate who were a bit tougher went there, and they were just harder than us, but they were just as smart because they were there, so.
Of course. So when you're there, you're sort of 11, 12, 13 years old. What were your ambitions then? What did you think you would grow up to be when you were?
I didn't know. I just didn't have a clue. I mean, I was a daydreamer. I just was away with the fairies. I didn't finish essays on time. I was always, all my school reports were about me daydreaming and not really concentrating. And I just watched TV, and I was in a kind of world of my own. And I would, I had a good imagination, but I definitely was away with the fairies, is what I would be described as.
That's the abiding memory. It was just in your own,
just in your own world. And but I did like watching. I loved. I liked things that boys like. I didn't like sport. I didn't like football. I play football with the other guys, but I used to spend a lot of time next to the goalkeeper because he liked James Bond films, and we could talk about those, and that to me was more interesting than playing football. And if the ball came down, I'd just kick it back down the other end. I wouldn't follow it. I'd just kick it down the other end and carry on the conversation about whatever films we liked. And so films and movies and TV, I was like a TV kid, like that TV kid on in Willy Wonka. I was TV, whatever his name was, TV, Mike TV. I was a bit like that. I liked TV, and I liked listening to the vinyl. Was a way of listening to things over and over in detail. Monty Python records in particular, as we were saying earlier, I would listen to those because forensically, over and over, and what I was fascinated by was that this was irreverent and unorthodox, but it was a legitimate profession. So you could behave like this, and it would be, these people did it for a living.
That's why I asked what your ambitions were. So you were becoming, so your teenage years, you became conscious of the possibility that this world was also work.
Yeah, and I loved that. I remember seeing one of these like look and learn books when I was a kid, and it had a picture of a movie set with like cameras and facades, and behind the facade it wasn't real. I remember thinking, wow, that looks amazing. That trick that you can play with people to make them think that something they're seeing is real, but it's not real. So I remember being fascinated by that. And my aunt was a makeup artist in TV, and she Granada TV,
okay.
And she.
So they meet everyone, don't they?
She knew everyone, and I thought it was the most glamorous job in the world. And she had a 21st birthday party at my parents' house because they had a reasonably big semi-detached house, and invited lots of people from Granada TV. But I wasn't allowed at the party. But I remember looking through the upstairs banister at people coming in, and Tony Wilson was one of them.
No
Tony
way.
Tony Wilson came in. I was like looking through the banisters. He came to us saying, "Hey, that's the guy from Granada Reports," and I think
He was royalty in Manchester.
He
Not
was,
quite by then. Later,
well,
wasn't he?
76.
Sure.
He already was starting to. He did have a show on Granada that was not the news. That was about music.
Yes.
Because in those days there was Top of the Pops. There was the Old Grey Whistle Test, which had more unorthodox stuff, like more
John Peely flavoured.
Stuff. And then there was, but there was odd people in the regions like. Tony Wilson was odd because like he had some autonomy in those days. Rock and roll was not executives, people in power had predated rock and roll. So it was still the preserve of young people or people who were slightly less than young. I mean, Tony Wilson, when he was doing these shows, was in his 20s.
Yes, amazing.
He was in his 20s.
Yeah.
So, and older people would just, in those days, gave some autonomy to young people. They go, you understand all this stuff that these young people like. And that, I think, happened in pockets. It just depended who you were. And he did have a show, and I think it was called So It Goes. He would play bands the first time Blondie was on TV in the UK was in Manchester on Granada TV. And the Sex Pistols, the first time they were on TV was in Manchester on Granada TV, and the Beatles. But anyway.
I didn't know that. So you then very early had a sense of show business being a career. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
I kind of thought that more likely you'd stumble into it or something like that.
Well, I knew it was possible, but I didn't know quite what I'd do. And
but you already like being looked at. You like being noticed.
I think I thought I did. I thought, well, I could do impersonations. That's the thing. You know? And it was
when did you discover that? I mean,
I just watched TV and I could do the voices of people. And I was like 12 years old, 11 or 12 years old, and my brother was in the same school. He was in the sixth form.
Right.
Big age gap,
huge,
12 and 18.
Absolutely.
And he would call me up to the sixth form common room.
No way.
Where guys with fledgling beards would
and pipes.
Pipes. That's how long ago it was. It felt like that. So when I first started there, it was the first 2 years I was there before it became a comprehensive school. It really felt not any different from Tom Brown's school days.
Right, yeah.
Lots of guys could look at me wrong and just punch me in the face. And then a teacher would just come up and just go, "Don't do that," and just.
It's only pain, doesn't really hurt.
It's just, it was scary. It was like really oppressive. But the education was good, but it was.
But if your big brother is getting you to show off to his mates, you must be good.
The one thing that saved me was I had an identity. Our family was known because we had, in a nice way, we had a distinctive name, and I had two older brothers there, so I was a Coogan, and I had two older brothers, and my brother would bring me up to the sixth form common room and make me do impersonations. And those days, it was like, do Harold Wilson, do James Callahan, do Margaret Thatcher, and I could do all those, and I'd do it for the sixth form, and they'd just stand there and laugh at me and go, and because I was 11 or 12, they just stand there, like full nose going, like,
go on then.
And they go, okay, go away now. So.
Did you know that, did you know you had a gift at this point? Or was it just, thank God I've got an identity?
People sometimes would say, well, no, I wasn't the class clown.
No, I'm sensing
there was
that.
a class clown, but I thought the class clown was a dick. I was more into I had a small group of friends who liked our cool comedy, like our indie bands, and we would watch stuff on BBC Two. We wouldn't watch George and Mildred or the ITV comedy that was generally speaking not good.
Sure.
Rising Damp perhaps being an exception to that. And they sometimes had the moments, but the BBC Two was where that was kind of my education. My cultural education was the BBC.
Yeah.
And BBC Two in particular. And I only looking back, I realise this now. My education was curated by the BBC. Gosh. So that when you watched BBC Two in those days, because there wasn't all this choice, it was like, here's something popular, here's something you ought to know. It's seen as elitist now, but in actual fact, there was something rather patriarchal.
It was what Reith intended, wasn't it? That you'd have the entertainment and the information.
Yes, inform, educate, entertain. These days, people can gorge themselves on a diet of any one of those things.
That's exactly right, yeah.
And which is great if you want to inform yourself.
Sure.
But it's terrible if you just want to entertain yourself and you don't want to do the other two things. Yeah. So you can entertain yourself constantly and reflect all those prejudices and all those things you want to be fed back and there was something that's rather sad, and that's sounding like an old fart, about the fact that in those days there was this idea that we can provide you with a balanced diet.
Well, the different sides of
you can have your pudding, but you've got to have this, and you've got to eat your greens.
Yeah.
And now people just eat pudding
all day long, every day.
They get diabetic. They get mentally diabetic.
I love that. That's exactly right, isn't it? So when did you first, there was a drama teacher at school? How did you, because you were applying to drama school by the time you got into the upper six. So what happened there? What happened in between the two?
I was, well, I watched BBC and saw that you were allowed to think in a different way, and you could be funny in a different way.
Yeah.
So
Well, we're talking not the 9 o'clock news, or
40 Towers, of course.
Yes,
which was BBC Two, and then graduated to. That was one of the things where Taste, it gained a following, and then the BBC realised it was good, and they went, "Oh, we'll put this on BBC One.
Yeah,
maybe ordinary people will like it," and they did.
Not the studenty type.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, so I'd watch stuff like that, and I watched stuff like Not the 9 O'Clock News, so I suppose, but even good quality, I would say, accessible stuff when I was growing up, like Porridge, Clement Lefrenay, Steptoe and Son,
sure,
crafted
stuff though, carefully crafted.
Yeah,
stuff.
Crafted, life affirming. It's the stuff that I gravitate towards now.
Yeah.
As a kind of a reaction against what I call acerbic cynicism, which is all pervasive now.
Yes, of course.
In terms of people's attitudes, and certainly in terms of entertainment, and actually,
there needs to be a victim of everything, doesn't there? It needs to be a kind of target.
A target. And in actual fact, So I like things that lift you, ultimately lift us up, and not don't sort of denigrate.
When were you first on stage in front of a sizable audience?
Well, I think I did stuff at sizable audience. I was a student. Well, before I was a student, I remember in sixth form common room. I thought I'll do politics at university. I thought I can know a bit about that, and I'll do that. And I just didn't get the grades. So I thought I'll stay back and try and get better grades. And then I thought, well, I'll apply to drama school. That's what people did. Because I remember thinking...
So I'm not sensing any burning ambition here.
I was in a common room one day.
Right.
Well, people used to say when I do funny voices, you should be on TV, you should be on TV. And I thought, people keep saying this. Well, maybe I could have a shot. And in actual fact, really, this is quite bizarre, because I remember in the common room thinking, well, there was like, there's a generation of funny people who kind of come along, and then another generation comes along, and look back and I remember there was all the Windmill D-Mob guys, and then the Goons, and Beyond the Fringe, and Alan Bennett, and Dudley Moore, and Peter Cook, and then Monty Python, and then 9 O'Clock News, and the young ones, and Ben Elton, and all that. They were just suddenly, the young ones had arrived.
That was
a new thing in the early 80s. And I remember when that came out, I thought, oh, there are, because a lot of comedy gets assimilated into the mainstream fairly quickly.
Of course.
And that hadn't. That was new. And I thought, oh, there's people who laugh at the same stuff I do. It's like it's not that, what I'd assumed was an esoteric sense of, I thought, no, there are other people out there who like what I like. That was actually quite a little bit of an epiphany. And then I thought, well, these are the new guys, but in 10 years' time, there's going to be another bunch of people.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe I could be one of those.
Okay.
So I
tried to go into drama school.
Weirdly, I went to a job centre in Middleton. It said actor/actress required.
Seriously?
Yeah. And I've still got the card. My dad, who passed away last year, he kept the card. I mean, it's a job centre card. And I went to the woman and said, I want to see what this is. And she said, it's not a proper job. It's just a profit share thing. I said, well, just call the number. I want to go see it. And they had an interview. And it was a guy who just come down from Oxford called Andy Mulligan, who writes children's books now. Yeah. And he'd just come down, he wanted to set up a theatre company, and he did, and we took it around adult education centres and sixth form colleges doing quite...
So you're at 19, 20 now, are you?
I was, I just turned 19.
Yeah.
And we did these shows. a bit like that Legs Akimbo theatre company that the League of Gentlemen do. It was a bit like that.
Not really.
It was kind of earnest, but it was sincere. But it was.
And did you feel something profound inside?
Oh yeah, I remember doing like shows where I did some angry monologue.
Yeah.
About why I beat my wife and lived on a council estate. I don't know what it was. Anyway, and I remember a guy. I remember swearing a lot, and it was in a community centre with a woman in a wheelchair, really close, a very old lady eating hard-boiled sweets loudly. And when I started swearing, she just said directly to me. She was only a yard from me. She just went, "Hey, you, watch your language." I remember thinking. It's theatre.
It's the fourth wall.
It's theatre. What are you doing? You're not allowed to talk. And then there was, yeah.
But you're on a. But this was the beginning. So you did.
So I did this, and this guy, Andy Mulligan. He was, I suppose, the first creative, clever person. I mean, like an intellectual. Okay. I would call him. He was an intellectual.
Sure.
And the first intellectual who saw what I did and said. You're good at this. Even though he was quite tough with me, you need to be more disciplined. But you have talent.
Right.
You should do that. He directed me. You should do this. When you go and audition, you should do this thing. I went and auditioned at London drama schools, and I didn't get in any of them. But and it kind of dovetailed with me meeting this guy and this theatre group, and I auditioned at Manchester. Met, which was then Manchester Polytechnic.
Which is where a lot of the young ones had gone previously, hadn't they?
No, they went to the university. It was
mistake.
Julie Walters went there, and David Suchet,
and
a bunch of other... David Threlfall went there. A lot of kind of edgy, interesting actors went there. And I got in there, and I remember it was I remember it very clearly because... when you go to drama school, they operate recall systems where you go and you audition. If they like you, they invite you back. And
yes.
I did a. You're supposed to do like a Shakespeare and a modern, and I did that, and then you're supposed to do something else. And they said, "Can you give us your third thing?" And I did a bad auditionee, someone who doing a bad audition, and
it's very bold.
Yeah, it was. But I'd had advice from from Andy, who said, do that thing. And I said, okay, I'm going to do a bad audition. Yeah, and I left the room and came in the room and said, is the right room for auditions? And came in and went right up to the panel and leant on the desk and told them to enjoy it and stuff. Really just did lots of things you're not supposed to do. And I remember they were laughing a lot. And I mean, they were really laughing a lot.
Yeah.
And I remember afterwards, this guy came, they sort of asked me, I had an interview in the room, they said, we're going to offer you, we normally operate a recall system, but we're going to offer you a place straight away. And Andy was in a pub across the road, the Pars Wood in Didsbury, Manchester. And I went in afterwards, I said, they've offered me a place at the drama school. And I remember thinking, that means I must be extra good. Right, and so that was a real, and it's funny how that sticks in my mind now. I was very excited because
of course,
these clever people had told me I was good.
Yes, and it happened quite quickly after that.
I went to drama school. I wasn't very good at the Stanislavski stuff. And
why not?
Because I suppose at the time I found it, it was like, this is what you have to do to act.
Okay,
it almost like
on rails.
It's like, yeah, this is what you do. You're supposed to do this, this, and this. And if you're going to be a tramp, you've got to go and live like a tramp for 6 weeks, and then you can be a tramp. It's all very method, Stanislavski-esque. And
what you'd always got the best reactions for were the stuff where you actually had quite a lot of freedom to do things the way that you wanted to do them.
It didn't allow for... to me, it was like... I mean, a lot of the physical stuff was very useful at drama school. They teach you how to breathe and how to project and all that stuff. And some of the technical stuff is genuinely... useful and how to warm your vocal cords up when you're doing a live show. That stuff matters, and it is very useful. Technical stuff is useful, but it didn't allow room for intuition or individualism in terms of how you do stuff. And it's like someone gives you a manual. Sometimes sometimes any kind of education can in some respects can liberate you, but it can also constrain your thinking to ways that have been pre-established. And in actual fact, what was I only in retrospect to this is that some of the things that I would do intuitively were kind of being repressed a bit.
Yeah, okay.
Because they weren't
Do you
part
know
of the manual.
the story about Olivier and Dustin Hoffman when they made Marathon?
Oh yeah, the story is
it's the same thing, isn't
when
it?
he says try acting, dear boy.
I've been up all night. Why don't you try acting?
He said he'd been up all night, but I think Dustin Hoffman's version of that story is that it was a little bit that he had been up all night. But not just being, he was up all night, he said, because he had to look completely bedraggled the next day. But he was up all night and he'd been to Studio 54. He wasn't just...
Oh, fair enough.
He kind of
right.
It was like one of those things where it was kill two birds with one stone. I can stay up all night, have a great time, and it'll work for me tomorrow because I'm supposed to look terrible. So it wasn't just that he'd been super...
there with matchsticks in his eyes, desperately trying to stay awake. I didn't know that. Yeah, so the bit I don't understand now, I just don't know, because you start creating your own characters. I think the first time most of us saw you on the telly would be Paul Calf, but the first time most of us heard you on the telly would be Spitting Image. Is that right? Were they happening at the same time when you were doing voices on Spitting Image and developing for stand-up, presumably, characters like Paul Calf and
I was at drama school. I was moonlighting a lot, doing a lot of voiceovers for radio commercials and stuff like that. I was doing these lot of voice and earning a bit of money. And I was a bit of a
proper
wheeler.
Money as well.
I was being a bit of a wheeler dealer kind of. It wasn't very arty at all. It was very kind of opportunistic, I guess. And but that did lead me to. And you're supposed to do this thing where you do a showcase at the end, and agents come and pick you because you do a great speech from some play and blah blah blah. And I got diddly squat from
really?
that.
Not a whisper.
All the work I got was from the stuff I was doing outside college. I started doing stand-up to get an equity card. I stood on stage at some medical student review that was terrible, and my buddy who was in a band said, why don't you go and do some of those voices? And I stood on stage, did some funny voices. They all laughed, and I was like, that felt good. And they laughed at pretty lame material. I was thinking if I got some good material, they might laugh a lot. And
because the voices were so good, they laughed at lame
the voices,
material.
And for some reason people laugh at... I could do voices very well. I had a good ear. And even now, it slightly puzzles me. There's a weird thing where people... I understand why people laugh at jokes or why people laugh at humorous constructs.
Yeah.
But why people laugh at a voice because it's the same as someone else's is an odd thing. Why it makes you laugh. It's like laughing at an acrobat, laughing at someone doing a trick. I don't know why it's funny, but people do.
Yeah, they certainly do.
So anyway, when
that took off. That side of things really took off.
So I got a job on Spitting Image when I was in college. Right. So I got in those days before cell phones. Crikey, it was just a payphone in the corner of the canteen, and the phone would ring, and someone would pick it up and shout the name of whoever it was. And they were either in the canteen or they're not, or someone would go and look for them. And someone called my name and I went over, and it was this guy who in Manchester who was acting as my agent at the time for my funny voices. And he said, they want you as the new voice on Spitting Image. And that was because I'd sent a cassette to John Lloyd.
Yeah, wow.
And the late Jeff Perkins,
sure.
who was, one of the comedy...
the godfathers of...
Well, they were
TV comedy at the time.
They were, yeah. And so they both they gave me a break because they thought I was good, and I got into Spitting Image and I got some TV shows, not the kind of stuff I'd like. I mean, I did Sunday Night at the Palladium with Jimmy Tarbuck when I was 22 years old.
In character?
No,
as an impressionist.
Doing stand-up comedy with impressions.
Yes.
Mostly impressions.
Sure.
In a shiny suit on ITV.
Okay. But this is big time, Steve.
It was big time. And so for me, it was like, I'm 23. I'm on, they get 10 million viewers. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this and maybe I can kind of, I remember thinking, I don't want to be on Sunday Night Playing with Jimmy Tarbuck. I want to be like Stephen Fry. I remember saying that when I was 22.
Gosh.
But it was like, just go where the work is and figure it out later. And that's sort of what I did.
That's exactly what's happened, isn't it? I mean, it's not, I almost reached for the word arrogant then, because most 23-year-old comics would have killed to be on Sunday night.
I know, but that part of that kind of, that guy who liked indie bands that no one had ever heard of.
You're just like you're watching Grease.
Oh my God,
on stage with Jimmy Tarbuck.
So even though I was like, it was like, oh, a lot of people were like, wow, I was... I mean, it is sort of a snobbery in a way, but it served me well because I wanted to do stuff that I wanted to watch.
Okay.
I didn't watch Sunday Night at the Palladium.
Sure.
I thought it was garbage.
Yeah.
I mean, but a lot of people liked it. It was very popular. I mean, that's just me.
I understand.
You know,
I
mean, look,
Sure.
if people like stuff, that's great.
Yeah.
But
It wasn't for you. It wasn't for you.
It wasn't for me, and I think it was lame. You know, I still think there is stuff that I think is. I'm a populist. I think the really good stuff is clever and accessible. You know, so
Of course. And then the magic moment from where I sit happened, because what you just said was really interesting about the waves of talent in comedy coming, and you thinking, well, I could be the next one. I could be the one after the young ones. And as I understand it, it was almost by accident that you and Chris Morris and Armando Iannucci and a couple of other people ended up sitting in the same room at BBC London originally, or BBC, it was certainly BBC Radio.
it was sort of it was. I can't. It's always a bit foggy, but I remember I
interviewed Armando a couple of years ago, and he's not entirely clear on it either.
No, I know that Patrick Marber
Yes.
Was doing stand-up at the time and not particularly good at it, even by his own admission. He was all right. Patrick was okay. He had funny moments. But anyway, Patrick was... I love Patrick. Is like now is like sort of an older brother, and I've got a lot of affection for him because he really became a mentor to me in some ways. Patrick, but back in the day, I had a group of friends that was Henry Normal, who ended up running Baby Cow, the company.
It's back from Manchester. This
was back in Manchester, and there was Caroline Ahern and
course.
John Thompson. Dave Gorman, I remember, was hovering around.
Was he?
And there was also a bunch of people like Lem Sissay.
Yes.
And there were the guy called Brian Glancy, that died a few years ago. But these little they used to have these buskers nights at this arts venue, because there were no alternative comedy venues then, but there were some arty venues where a motley crew of John Cooper Clarke would sometimes do that. So I did a few gigs with him early on. So there was like all these odd bod type performer, writer, singer songwriters,
but proper talented. All of those people
all
you
talented.
just
Some
mentioned.
funny, some just guitar players singing songs, and they would all do stuff and experiment, and that was and John and Caroline, we did a show. We did a pilot show for Granada that didn't get picked up like in 1991.
Gosh.
John, me, and Caroline, and that was my, if you like, that was my northern gang.
Yes.
That I felt a kind of a little bit of. They were my familiars.
Yeah.
And then I met the Armando's gang that he assembled of all the smart people, and he did. I mean, some of the people he was at Oxford with, and there was Chris. He'd heard Chris's show that was really.
That was on BBC London. Chris's show. It was really, it was out there. It was completely. He got away with
murder.
murder.
It was very odd. Yeah.
That's right.
And then Armando was
he was
like,
always
"You've got to
doing
come
the
and do this
splicing, which you do with scissors in those days.
Yeah,
razor blades.
Oh,
and
I saw Armando with a razor blade slicing tape.
That's right.
It sounds so,
doesn't it?
So quaint now.
It's crazy.
Yeah, he would be splicing our shows together, and we had Bakelite headphones with like a woven cord that were basically from the war. Yeah, it was really nuts.
And how did you? I've got two questions. First of all, were you intimidated by the Oxbridge side of it?
Well, a little bit, but not necessarily in a bad way. But yes, I was. I mean, they'd sit there talking about stuff. To be honest, sometimes I didn't quite know if they talked about any kind of classicism, culturally, or I just was a bit lost. Some of the references escaped me, but I wasn't thick. I was just very.
It's the difference between knowledge and intelligence. You had the intelligence, but you didn't have that knowledge.
I mean, yes.
Should have read that encyclopedia when you had the chance.
I should have done. In fact, but it kind of gave me an appetite for learning and appreciating learning. And but they had a kind of confidence and a sort of. It was good for me to be around them, and they also taught me, I suppose, if anything, I'd say Armando and Patrick, to reach beyond my comfort zone to try and be better than I thought I could be. To be
the thing you sort of knew you could and should be when you were on stage at the Palladium.
I wanted to be, but the thing is, for what I would call the day-to-day gang, which mostly knew each other before I came along. I did feel like a little bit of an outsider, but they felt more comfortable in their own skin, and I wanted to, but I sort of thought I've kind of bluffed my way into their camp somehow. They've let me join their gang. So I was kind of like, I suppose I felt a bit like they were Genesis and I was Phil Collins. Right? And they let me be the drummer. Right?
But you soon took over lead vocals, didn't you, to carry on to tortured analogy?
Yeah. But Armando opened my eyes, because I remember reading this stuff thinking, this is amazing. This is really, feels like, I remember thinking, crying, laughing, reading the stuff that we were doing, thinking, this is like so good. And it's like the kind of stuff I would want to listen to, and I'm part of it.
For the first time ever?
Yeah. That this is something I remember thinking, I don't want to, there's nobody in comedy that I'd want to swap places with right now.
Wow.
This is, I just knew this is way ahead of anything else. Everything else feels tired. This feels exactly what it said. It's making me laugh, and I want to be part.
That's incredible, because I was about to ask you when you first realised that the alchemy had worked with the day-to-day gang, and but you realised it before an audience even saw it. You just knew in yourself, even if no one had liked it, you'd still have known it was brilliant.
Oh yeah, we I mean, Patrick, Armando, and all those guys, we all knew it was good, and we were all laughing at it. We all these were and they were, we just knew it was really good stuff. It was so exciting, and it was quite democratic. I mean, although it was Chris and Armando were in charge, sort of thing, but we were definitely all invited to throw in random ideas, and there was once we all got into a groove of this new way of thinking, Armando kind of very quickly educated us in this new approach, and then it became really a lot of fun to do this stuff that felt, like I said, adventurous.
Yeah.
And we thought it was good. And it's almost like we just knew it was good. And we thought, when it went out on the BBC,
it for anyone except each other.
I don't think anybody watched the show. We weren't remotely interested in viewing figures. Sure. It was like, this is the best stuff on TV right now. I don't care, 3 people watched it.
Because
it didn't matter. We just knew it was good. And we felt like we wanted to be part of it. And it was like, this is the new stuff. People, that we knew it was good. And it was exciting to be part of that.
And you literally were that thing that you'd envisioned years previously. You were the new wave. I get that, and oddly, that's a nice punctuation mark, because then next thing you know, you're really, really famous. But I mean, obviously, Alan Partridge emerges from the day to day. Alan Partridge becomes. Yeah,
I sort of had with my Northern gang, I'd done these other characters, which is Paul Calf.
Yes,
and
that's the first thing I saw you on Jonathan Ross's show when I was a student, and you were doing.
Yeah.
Basically, you were describing my friends standing at the front of the chip shop queue, paying for the chips with a fucking check, that kind of stuff. But Partridge was next level, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, what I was doing, Paul Calf was doing, I would say, jokes.
Yes,
good
exactly.
Jokes.
Brilliant jokes.
Like, I think, I'm a feminist. I think you've got to be these days if you want to get your end away, which is. This is pre-Me Too humour, but
it was. Not, though.
But the point is, it wasn't actually sexist. It was actually, it was actually quite important that it was laughing at that unreconstructed point of view of him. In fact, I remember once doing that character, this Paul Calf character, at a students' union and being booed by the students' union for being sexist.
Love it. And
then I took my wig off and went, I'm doing a character. It's ironic. I mean, in the middle of my act, I pulled the wig off and went, this is a character. And afterwards they came up and apologized and said, we didn't realize you were being ironic. And we've had a discussion. We decided we actually approve of what you're doing.
We've decided that you're funny. It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. That was like it was sort of around that time because I was saying, stuff that was just denigrating about students or people who had anyway. But I mean, but
you're big now. That's it.
Yeah, and Patrick, I've got to say, Patrick helped me marshal my creativity and give it some discipline.
Okay.
At the time, because I was sort of a bit all over the place doing things.
Still a bit away with the fairies, even though you were.
Yeah, I thought I'm going to do this, do that, and I was doing a lot of voiceovers, which I loathed doing.
But the money became.
The money now subsidised me doing my new weird character stuff at art centres for no quid.
Sure.
And then I got my show together and took it to the Edinburgh Festival. And Patrick, this was around time of the Day-Today. It was of On the Hour on the Radio 4.
Version, yeah.
And Patrick helped me. I said, "Do you have a director?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, you need director." And he went through the show. I was doing it with John Thompson at the time. This character show that I was trying to. It was very early on in my career. I was known as a funny voice guy, and I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that. I don't want to do impersonations. I think they're boring. I want to do something that's got substance. I don't know quite what that is, but I want to do something else. Then I met Armando and Patrick said, "You need to." He sort of directed me basically, and really helped sort of get me up and running.
I see.
And I remember he did once say to me, he doesn't like me saying this, but it's true. He did once look at me and he said to me, "You're more talented than me." He said, "But I'm cleverer than you are." He said, "So we need to work together."
Do you agree?
Yes. At the time, yes. Now it might be the opposite.
Who knows? But and from that point on, it's fair to say professionally, it's all known. It was all done in pub. Everyone knows what happened next. Everyone knows the next stages of your life, but less comfortably for you. That from this point onwards, in some ways, your private life became public property as well. And it's fair to say that you had the highs and the lows.
Well, what happened to me was I became the subject of Tabloid, which for me was galling. Not because I was like, I don't read those newspapers. I like arty things. Why are they talking about me?
Why do you think they were? Because you took the piss out of the media?
No, not at the time. I was just famous enough for them to want to talk about me. I don't think there was any agenda from the press. There might subsequently.
Of course, post Leveson, post hacking anyway.
Yeah, and all that, but not at the time. No, I think I was just like, he's quite well known.
Right.
He's on TV a bit. People are talking about him. Let's go for him. And also, I gave them. What I did was I didn't really have an adolescence. I skipped my adolescence. I didn't go out. I didn't go to clubs and everything. I became quite sort of focused on what. I mean, although I was just a bit nerdy, I guess.
Sure.
And then when
you're talking about James Bond with the goalkeeper,
exactly,
when your mates were trying to go off with girls.
I know. So
you got off with a lot of girls.
So when I became famous, I was like, now I'm going to have some fun, and it was pretty, I did have some fun, but then I sort of descended into a kind of a cliche, you know. I did some cocaine at like in the early 90s. Someone gave me some, and I was like, oh, this is fun. Did some more, and then I just went off the deep end, and then got my life back together, and then went off the deep end again, and really it's sort of I think around 19. It was and then I sort of that kind of I really sort of it all went wrong for me. Really, it was after 1998. 1998 was everything came together in my career. Like I was doing a sellout live show. I was winning BAFTAs for Alan Partridge.
Everything you touched.
Everything was great. It was really great, and I was working with people I liked. And then when it came to a conclusion that year, everyone else went off to sort of do their other things, which is kind of easier sometimes for people who are not quite
a little bit lower in the pecking order.
Just underneath the visibility thing. And I was looking around going, well, what do I do now? And a little bit like directionless. Yes. And so that void was filled by drink and drugs and sort of self-destructive. I don't really. I mean, I don't care if people. I don't want to like go, oh, it's terrible. It's an illness and all that stuff. You know, it was. You know, when you do that stuff, it's I wasn't doing it because I've had some because I thought I was. I mean, sometimes people who do fall into that pattern of behavior say, you know, oh, it's because when I was a child I wasn't loved or all that stuff. I was doing it because I thought I was really great and I deserved a reward.
Yeah, fair enough.
And but that was still was not very. It was very still really self-destructive.
How close were you to really messing everything up?
The worst of me is it went on for quite a long time because I was able to
You weren't going to run out of money anytime soon either.
No, I was able to just about deliver stuff that was okay whilst keeping this habit going.
Right.
And then, so I was able to
keep both plates
keep both
spinning.
things going, plate spinning, which is really bad. I was almost like envious of people who hit rock bottom because they could then regroup and reboot their life and readdress everything, and I didn't really have that. That just happened to come later for me, and it became a thing where it's just like I almost became bored of my own behaviour. I just decided to stop.
And for me, and for probably most fans, Philomena becomes another massive punctuation mark. It's probably a little bit simplistic, but it almost felt like redemption, both professionally and personally. First time you played a really straight role.
Yeah.
Well, not quite, but on that kind of scale.
Yes,
and it was your baby. It was your project. It was your.
No, it was. I found it. I from Genesis to it's complete. I think it was me.
Yes.
And then people came along and joined the party, but really good people like Judi Dench and Stephen Frears.
Well, just briefly, what was it like when Judi Dench said yes?
Do you know what? It was great. I mean, it was really good. But it was because it was the first time I didn't just listen to advice. I didn't say, what shall I do? I'd sort of spent a lot of time listening to advice, but this was the first time I just thought, look, I'll do what I want to do, what I feel like doing creatively, and see if it works. I'm just going to do what I want to do. And I found this story in the Guardian about Philomena and Martin, and I was trying to get Colm, the Irish writer Colm Tobin, to write it, and he didn't want. It was almost like, well, no one else wanted to do. I didn't think I could write it. And
why not?
I don't know, because I thought, well, I'm a comedy writer, and I don't. I think the story's great, but. But then I had to think about it a lot, and then I met up with Christine Langan, who said, I told her how I would tell the story, because I got the rights to Martin's book, but really I was more interested in his relationship with Philomena, that rather than Philomena's actual son.
Oh, okay.
I
didn't know that,
because the book is already about this other life of. Philomena's son he had in America, because he was actually the missing son in the film Philomena. You don't know. He actually became very successful in the Republican Party in the US and was just very, very prominent figure in politics, and before he caught AIDS and had this fatal illness. But at the time, I just wanted to tell the story of this an odd couple story about a working class Irish woman and a middle class Oxbridge intellectual.
But that's so interesting when you put it like that after what we've talked about, because that's you in a way.
I felt like I knew both those people.
Exactly.
And I felt like I wouldn't be hamstrung by some sort of misguided liberal guilt about patronising a working class Irish woman. Because I was like, what I thought was, I bet a lot of, without wanting to just pigeonhole people, a lot of liberal intellectuals will go, well, we can't be nasty to the working class Irish woman. We can't make fun of her because she's working class and Irish. And it's like, yes, you can. And lots of old working class Irish women say daft things. They do.
I grew up with them.
Yeah,
you could say. Yes.
Yeah, and you can laugh, and you can laugh at the things people say. You can laugh at someone, and you can love them at the same time. And so I felt like, I think I know who she is, and I met her, of course. And so anyway, I mean, but to sort of jump forward, that what happened really with that whole thing was. It was one of those experiences in my life where everything happened perfectly.
Wow.
From finding the story to talking about it, to everything seemed to work perfectly. I met Judy's agent, go and talk to Judy. I went to Dame Judy's house in Sussex and knocked on the door, and she opened the door and invited me in, and I told her the story, and she she was moved by it, and I didn't even have a script. I just told her a story, and then I said, "Is this something that would interest you? Are you interested in this?" And she said, "Yes, I am very interested." And and so I went back a few months later with a script that Jeff and I had written, and
that was it.
And Stephen Frears was interested in it, and Stephen was really hard with me and Jeff, and also meeting Jeff Pope was really great. Jeff was kind of, I felt like, is like an Essex version of me.
Okay.
He came from a sort of, I'd say, lower middle class background, which increasingly I found very useful. It's because I think I know how working class people talk, and posher people.
Yes, of course.
Talk, and because I feel like I mix them both, so I don't feel like I've got a gap in it. I don't feel uncomfortable writing dialogue for. I didn't at the time for like working people. But Jeff, his father was worked for Technicolor. My dad worked for IBM. They'd moved up in the world through education and through getting a profession that had some prestige, as it were. And what I liked, the reason I clicked with Jeff is he was a sports journalist. That's how he started out. So he had a kind of what I might call a meat and potatoes approach to writing.
Of course, he's got to
which
get it
is
out.
what I had. Not unprecious.
Yeah, so you complement each other perfectly then.
And we just got on with it, and I'd be trying to be clever and arty against my to try and sort of reach for something.
The muse.
And and he'd be like going, "Come on, let's get on with this."
Yeah.
You know? And I love Jeff, and we were still working on stuff together. So that was a big turning point in my career, and I felt like I'd just
And your personal life, surely.
I'm a personal life
satisfaction.
because what happened to me was I never engaged with the press. I never said, "Please forgive me." I never used the press or went to the press and did a mea culpa ever.
No.
I didn't go, "I'm a terrible person. Please, will you like me again?" I never did any of that. I just didn't talk to them, and all I did was I did that.
You let the work do the talking.
Just like sort of Protestant work ethic almost, which is just like, just do your job properly every day, and try and do your job well, and be creative. Concentrate on that. Don't be distracted by all this noise. Just do your job and do it to the best of your ability, and try and do good work that you'd be proud of, and that will liberate you from all this shit.
And did it.
Yeah.
And that, Steve Coogan, is where we are now. That's pretty much it, isn't it?
Well,
because you are now, the work that you do fits into the description you just provided for the early days of Philomena.
Yes. I mean, but I feel now I'm in a slightly different place because of that. And Philomena was a turning point because it was pivotal to all that, because it was me just saying, this is what I want to do. This is what I believe in. I want to say something I think is important. I want to say something about religion, but I don't want to be I don't want it to be a smug intellectual,
Sure.
Denigration.
You want to tell a story.
Denigration of it. I do want to criticise the institution, but I also want to dignify people of simple faith who I think have a dignity and who I grew up with. And although I'm an atheist, I do respect people who bear witness to their values through religion and live dignified lives. And that's what I wanted to do with that film, and not just do something that was linear in its worldview or blinkered. And I'd learned things from comedy, and what comedy, but comedy as an end in itself, although really enjoyable, is not enough. It's not enough. Comedy's really useful as a tool, and anything that can sugar the pill of subject matter, which is difficult, and if you can entertain people. The sweetest thing to me, creatively, is to entertain people and make them think about what they think and consider that they might be wrong about something.
Steve Coogan, it's been a pleasure.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.